What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Trying to understand the entirety of the Elder Scrolls universe and every single moment, person, faction and story on the timeline is one of the most complicated things I've been learning over the past 6 years. It's a vast array of never-ending information with conflicting sources and thousands of years worth of history, most of which involves characters and events not even encountered in the games themselves. Luckily for me, I absolutely love understanding the intricacies of it all, and if you're a regular viewer of FudgeMuppet, I'm sure you do as well. One thing that I love to do, both in Elder Scrolls history and in the history of the real world, is look back through the list of events, observing the chain of cause and effect, and think about what moments or people were the most impactful, perhaps even more so than they seemed at the time. In this video, I'm going to be going through 4 different mortals, each of who drastically changed Tamriel forever. It's important to keep in mind that change is the focus here, not necessarily significance. For example, the Dragonborn saving the world is very significant, but defeating Alduin doesn't really change Tamriel itself, it just stops it from being destroyed. On that note, these mortals won't include any main player characters, such as the Champion of Cyrodiil or the Nerevarine. Some of these characters we have super expansive lore videos on, so any related content will be linked in the description for your convenience. The list isn't ordered, and there's definitely plenty of other mortals we'd love to discuss the impacts of, so let us know if you want a part 2. With that said, sit back and prepare yourself for 4 mortals who forever changed Tamriel. First up on this list is someone everyone should be familiar with. Ysgramor. You hear about him plenty in Skyrim, especially if you join the Companions Guild, which he is responsible for founding, even though it has since changed quite a lot from its original form. You visit his tomb, you can get his shield, his axe Wuthrad, you can also visit the resting place of his son, Njol, in the location known as Njol Barrow, collecting his helmet. So why is Ysgramor responsible for forever changing Tamriel? Well, there's more reasons than you might think, but let's cover the foundation first. Ysgramor was an Atmoran, which is the ancestor race of modern-day Nords, and was from the icy continent Atmora, located far north of Tamriel. Ysgramor's homeland was plagued by civil war, and interestingly, he was actually a peaceful man. He wanted to flee the war and travel in search of new lands, and so he set off with his 2 sons, sailing to Skyrim in the late Merethic era. Other Atmorans would follow in his footsteps, traveling in his direction to Skyrim, away from the civil war they were being plagued with. Waves of Atmorans came, and eventually the men established a society in Skyrim. Their presence grew to such an extent they had built and lived in great cities such as Sarthal. The race of Elves, known as the Snow Elves, were in Skyrim also, and had actually established relations with the Atmorans. However, due to the rapidly increasing presence of man, the Elves eventually became quite concerned. In an act of fear, they committed an event that would be known as the Night of Tears, raiding the settlements of the Atmorans, slaying almost every single one and burning Sarthal to the ground. It is said that only Ysgramor and his sons escaped, and they fled back to Atmora, where they told the tales of their slain brethren. Ysgramor rallied a force to come back to Skyrim in an event appropriately named The Return. This peaceful Atmoran man had turned to a bloodthirsty warrior, seeking vengeance upon the Elves who spilt the blood of his kind. Leading 500 Atmorans who would later be known as the 500 Companions, Ysgramor returned and went on a genocidal killing spree, exterminating the Snow Elves. After reclaiming Sarthal, Ysgramor's forces were split into crews, each with a captain who decided to separate and expand the presence of men all over Tamriel, continuing to kill all the Elves in their way. The 500 Companions spread from Skyrim even to places like Blackmarsh and Solstheim. After his death, most of the Atmorans settled in Tamriel, and it is from them that modern-day Nords and traditions have evolved from, though it is worth noting that modern-day Nords have bits of Need in their blood due to the interbreeding of both proto-human races, Needs and Atmorans. So why is Ysgramor so significant? Well, he is almost single-handedly responsible for making Skyrim exactly what it is. It was dominated by Elves, but he took it over, bringing the cultures and traditions of Atmorans and making it a province of men. Furthermore, besides being responsible for Nords and all events involving them, he pushed many Snow Elves underground while slaying them, who later were changed into the vile Falmer, which inhabit subterranean Skyrim today. Therefore, Ysgramor is responsible for the Falmer and their interactions with the Dwemer underground, including the decades-long war between the Dwemer and the Falmer, known as the War of the Crag. On top of this, Ysgramor expanding the presence of men into Skyrim and beyond would lead to the creation of the first empire of the Nords and the Ysgramor Isgramor dynasty. Isgramor's descendants led this empire on many conquests early in the First Era, eventually taking over most of northern Tamriel. The Nords controlled the entirety of Morrowind, a deep stretch of the Nibelheim Valley in Cyrodiil, and most of present-day High Rock, plus having their huge presence in Skyrim, of course. This is incredibly significant, especially when you consider other events it made possible. For example, the Elysian Rebellion against the Aelids of Cyrodiil received assistance from the Nords, leading to their victory over the Elves, further dwindling their power over the continent and ushering in the age of mannish dominance. So by assisting these Nedic rebellions, Isgramor's descendants helped bring about the formation of the First Cyrodiilic Empire, and therefore all the empires and events leading on from this. Nordic expansion into the Nibelheim Valley also led to the prominence of an independent Nibelheimese identity, with cultural differences to Clovians. The ancient Nordic pantheon was also part of the foundation for the newly formed Eight Divines pantheon. Furthermore, without Isgramor's descendants leading the invasions and eventual occupation of Morrowind, it is likely that we would never see the Kai'ma and Dwemer team up to fight their common enemy, meaning no First Council, therefore no Battle of Red Mountain, meaning no Tribunal Gods, no Dagoth, no Nerevarine prophecies. It's amazing to really consider just how much Isgramor's decision to sail back to Tamriel with the companions impacted the timeline. Oh, and I shouldn't forget to mention Windhelm and the Palace of Kings. Isgramor had it all constructed in that specific spot so he could gaze at his son Njol's burial place from his palace. Next up, I'm introducing you to number 2 on this list, my man, or should I say my mer, Topple the Pilot. I absolutely love the story of Topple the Pilot, not just because it's a well-written tale of ancient travel, but because it was such a monumental event for changing the Elder Scrolls universe, specifically involving all things elves. So Topple the Pilot existed all the way back in the Merethic era. According to legend, the Aldmer came to the Somerset Isles early in this era after their homeland continent, Aldmeris, faced some sort of crisis. They traveled through the seas as refugees in search of new land, and according to the tales, they became lost in a storm before finally finding themselves discovering the area now called the Somerset Isles. Here, Aldmer society could begin again, and don't forget this is during a time when Daedra could freely access Tamriel, so while Aldmer society was growing, some elves, such as Topple the Pilot, departed on voyages. The reason for his expedition is debated. Some say Topple and the Aldmer was simply searching for new frontiers to discover what would be found beyond the horizons. However, his journal fragments suggest that Topple and other navigators were actually searching for their homeland Aldmeris. Anyways, Topple left the Somerset Isles and traveled all around Tamriel, documenting maps of all the different provinces. He went around the outside and into the Iliac Bay near High Rock. He traveled around and sailed all through Morrowind and made his way down and around Blackmarsh before entering the area later named after him, Topple Bay, and thinking he was finding a path home, accidentally traveled up the Niben River, later named after his ship. Here he traveled into the heartland of Cyrodiil, where he met some sort of native race of feathered bird people. Topple taught them to speak and write, and in return they gave Topple the 8 islands, where the Imperial City stands today. Topple the Pilot eventually found his way home, bringing maps which showed the Aldmer what lay beyond the Somerset Isles. This was hugely impactful to the Elder Scrolls timeline, for it gave other groups of Aldmer information which they acted on, leaving the Somerset Isles and traveling to other provinces of Tamriel. Let's talk about some impacts. Learning of High Rock, some Aldmer left and went here, who would go on to interbreed with the Nedic people, creating the race of Bretons, who, as you'd likely know, have a huge history in High Rock and still rule the lands with various kingdoms. Then there were the Elves, who left and went to Cyrodiil, to the 8 islands that Topple had received from the feathered bird people. The Aldmer who went here became the Aelids and built the White Gold Tower, enslaving Nedic people and creating a powerful elven empire. In response to this, Alicia's slave rebellion rose up, creating their own empire which acted as the precursor to today's empire. The Elysian Empire and the Aelids have a lasting cultural impact to this day, both architecturally, in the legal system, and in the Eight Divines pantheon. With the knowledge of Morrowind's existence, Veloth and his followers left to find a new home. Prophet Veloth worshipped the Daedra, and the Aldmer followers of Trinimac on the Somerset Isles had a huge problem with this. The two groups clashed, and Boethia came to the rescue of Veloth's group, eating Trinimac and excreting him, changing him into Malakath and turning his followers into orcs. So the Daedric Prince Malakath wouldn't even exist if Veloth's group didn't decide to leave on a great exodus to Morrowind, which they only knew about due to Topple's voyage. Then everything involving the Chimer in Morrowind also wouldn't have happened, so just like Ysgramor, Topple also played a part in the chain of events which led to the creation of the Tribunal, and of course the creation of the Dark Elf race after they were cursed. Simply put, Topple the Pilot's voyage forever changed Tamriel, because his findings led to the creation of various cultures and races who would go on to create various empires and play parts in other transformative Elder Scrolls events. Alright, I've brought up Alicia more than once if you haven't noticed, so I think it's time for me to fess up and reveal her as the third mortal who forever changed Tamriel. Alicia's impact on the timeline was huge. So, who was Alicia? Well, when the Aelids controlled Cyrodiil after traveling there, building the White Gold Tower and creating an entire civilization, they used humans as slaves. In the First Era, the men and women of Cyrodiil were born into oppression from their Aelid overlords, and Alicia was one of these unfortunate people. Humans were made to do whatever their elven oppressors wanted them to do, and in many cities, such as the one she was from, they were used for manual labor and also as entertainment in the form of torture. Alicia was able to escape being a slave and wanted to free the rest of her people. She prayed to the god Akatosh and her prayers were answered. Alicia received help from the demigod Morahouse and later on Pelennor Whitestrake. In the year 242 of the First Era, her evolution began. She had received divine help and inspiration to rally her fellow slaves to overthrow their elven masters. Later known as the Slave Queen, Alicia's rebellion occurred at the perfect time during a civil war amongst the Aelid Empire. Hunnidic forces received help from the Nords, as I mentioned earlier, and also from other Aelid nobles who had radical views, which is quite interesting. After many battles, her revolution came to an end just 1 year later, the 243rd year of the First Era, with the fall of the White Gold Tower. With her human army, Alicia created a new Cyrodiilic empire, the First Empire, and the new pantheon called the Eight Divines. She became the empire's first ruler and was named Saint Alicia by Akatosh upon her death. Akatosh blessed her with the blood of dragons, and as she lay dying and Akatosh visited her, a very important covenant was made. Her soul was bound to the Amulet of Kings, and so long as Alicia's generations were true to the dragon blood, worshipping Akatosh and his kin, and so long as Alicia's heirs shall bear the Amulet of Kings, then Akatosh and his divine kin would maintain a strong barrier between Tamriel and Oblivion, so that mortal man would never have to be subject to the threat of Daedra again. The eternal dragon fires of the Imperial City were also made to burn so long as an heir to the throne bared the Amulet of Kings. But they would be extinguished if there was no heir to wear it, as seen in Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. This is super significant because remember, Daedra could easily access Tamriel in the First Era, and the pact between Alicia and Akatosh stopped this. Furthermore, remember that the Aelid's rule over men was helped largely by the fact that they worshipped Daedra and had help from them, even in the form of Daedra and undead in the mortal realm, to form numbers in their army. So Alicia is largely responsible for the fact that Daedra can't just come into Tamriel whenever they please, and even though she got a lot of help from the Nords, she's also largely responsible for kicking out the Aelids and creating an age of prosperity for the human races of Tamriel. Furthermore, creating the First Empire and everything involving the Amulet of Kings, Alicia set the course for all the Cyrodiilic empires that followed and the events they have been involved in to this day, which, as you'd assume, covers a scope so grand it can't all be covered in this video. Finally, it's worth noting that Alicia had followers which continued her legacy, who made up part of a faction known as the Elysian Order. These religious zealots received teachings from an Imgur, that is the ape-like race usually found in Valenwood, named Maruk. This Imgur prophet, Maruk, claimed to have been able to speak to Alicia from beyond the grave, and she bestowed wisdom upon him, information which questioned elven superiority. He went on to promote a monotheistic religion, that is one with just one god, while slyly including the other divines as spirits and saints in this religion's canon. This religion gained widespread adoption for some time, and the one figurehead god was simply referred to as the One. Eventually, Maruk and his followers, making up the Elysian Order, gained so much power they got control of the empire in the year 361. This is important because based on Alicia's teachings, they ruled a good part of Tamriel for over 2,000 years until they died a slow death as the order split into different groups. One group, known as the Marikati Selectives, caused a dragon break to occur in the year 1200 of the First Era. This mysterious cultish group did this to remove the elven aspects from Akatosh, truly separating Akatosh and Uriel. Dragon breaks are super complicated complicated, but basically they involve a splitting of the timelines. Multiple timelines are created, forging multiple versions of history, but then at the end of the Dragon Break, all the different timelines are merged into one, meaning there are many contradictions. However, all the truths are in fact true. It's super complex, but basically this created lots of issues until the First Empire and the Elysian Order collapsed, and Riemann Cyrodiil began the Second Empire. All of it can be traced back to the actions of Alicia, who was necessary for all of it to occur, and is therefore responsible for many of the Empire-based events that follow. Take a moment to digest all of that, or head to the description to watch our relevant videos for more explanation on some of the deeper lore topics. And finally, we come to the last mortal on our list of 4 mortals who forever changed Tamriel. This 4th mortal eventually ascended to godhood, becoming Talos, but before then he existed as none other than Tiber Septim. The origins of Tiber Septim are debated, with many conflicting sources. However, what's important to know is that he was originally a general in the Empire, serving at the side of Emperor Culhwch. Culhwch was the petty king of Falkreath in Skyrim. Tiber Septim helped him unite the Clovian estates of Cyrodiil in under a year, so even from the beginning, Tiber was showing his skills at bringing unity to a land. Emperor Culhwch, who wasn't emperor at this time, went on to attack and capture the imperial city, proclaiming himself as emperor in the 854th year of the Second Era. However, Culhwch was assassinated before he was formally crowned, and so Tiber Septim was crowned emperor instead, in what would be the start of the Septim dynasty. Some people theorize that it was Tiber Septim who actually murdered Culhwch to get the power for himself. However, the generally accepted belief is that Culhwch was killed by an assassin from High Rock. Tiber Septim went on to lead the Empire, waging the Tiber Wars, which are incredibly significant. These wars involved Tiber Septim conquering all of Tamriel, even putting the Somerset Isles, which he used the Numidium to conquer, under control of the Empire. By uniting all of Tamriel, the Third Era began, and the Third Empire was born. This is the same empire existing in the time of Skyrim. Tiber Septim bringing unity to Tamriel also helped to instill the more cosmopolitan ideals which still exist in the Third Empire to this day. Furthermore, think of all the specific chains of events which have followed on from the Septim dynasty's involvement in the Elder Scrolls universe. There's too much history to fit in one video, and it also includes pretty much everything encompassed in the context explored in the actual main games of the Elder Scrolls series. In Elder Scrolls Arena, it is Emperor Uriel Septim VII who is imprisoned by his battle mage Yeager Tharn. In Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, it is the Emperor which sends the agent to Daggerfall, which ultimately leads to events causing the warp in the west, a dragon break which made multiple timelines of different versions of events and merged them all into one, having various impacts on the main timeline going forward. Tiber Septim's dynasty is also involved in the events of Morrowind, again with the same emperor, Uriel Septim VII, who sent the prisoner to Morrowind, leading to the events revolving around the Nerevarine and the fall of the Tribunal Gods. Though of course by the time of Skyrim, things have moved on to the Mede dynasty, but even that is set up from the 200 years of events between Oblivion and Skyrim, which were largely influenced by the Oblivion Crisis, which occurred after, as we all know, yes, a Septim was assassinated in Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. This brought the dynasty to an end. The Empire began to crumble, the Thalmor rose to power, they gained control of multiple provinces the Empire used to control, the Great War happened, the White Gold Concordat was signed, the Argonians invaded Blackmarsh, the Civil War in Skyrim happened, lots of juicy lore as a result of a Daedric invasion only possible due to the assassination of a Septim. What should also be mentioned is that when Tiber Septim died in the 38th year of the Third Era, he ascended to godhood, becoming Talos, which as we know became a 9th divine and caused huge controversy after the Thalmor made the Empire ban his worship. As Talos, Tiber Septim also retroactively rebranded Cyrodiil as Lord of the Rings, or to put it more accurately, he retroactively changed Cyrodiil from a jungle into fertile grassland. Overall, Tiber Septim's life in mortal form is responsible for his ascendancy to godhood and for all the events stemming from the Third Empire he created and the Septim dynasty. There's no doubt this man forever changed Tamriel. And that wraps up another Elder Scrolls lore video exploring 4 of the most influential mortals on the timeline. These figures did great things, and many of them caused huge shifts in the fate of the continent, without ever being able to see the long-lasting impacts of their actions. As always, thank you so much for watching FudgeMuppet. We all really appreciate your support, and it means so much to us that you have a passion for the Elder Scrolls universe just like we do. Social media links are in the description if you happen to be interested. My name is Michael, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.